What if the secret to getting a teenager to eat their vegetables isn't a lecture from a medical professional, but actually a conversation with a peer
Hmm.
who lives 4,000 miles away?
Right, which sounds completely counterintuitive at first.
It really does. But welcome to another deep dive. Whether you're prepping for a meeting, trying to catch up on the latest educational strategies, or you're just, insanely curious about how human beings actually absorb information, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
Today, we are looking at a really fascinating source, detailing an initiative that takes the traditional kind of static health class and transforms it into this living, breathing, global sociological experiment.
Yeah, the source material we are unpacking today revolves around an educational initiative called the Healthy Body and Clean Environment E-Twinning Project.
Which is quite the title.
It is. And the core mission of our deep dive today is to explore how this specific project cleverly intertwines three major disciplines. So we're talking daily nutrition, cultural exchange, and environmental awareness.
Some massive scope.
It really is an ambitious framework. It's designed to completely reshape how young minds approach what is on their plates. We are looking at a system that attempts to rewire those fundamental habits formed during critical educational years.
Right, because those habits stick.
Exactly. The text explicitly notes that these habits dictate long-term physical and mental development.
And I think that long-term development is the perfect place to start. We are talking about the foundation of a healthy life being built on incredibly mundane, repetitive daily choices.
Yeah, the day-to-day stuff.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the massive global impact of this project, we actually have to start at the absolute most granular level, which is the daily routine.
Right, you can't skip the basics.
You really can't. The text points out that the project's fundamental premise isn't just about, growing taller or running faster. It states that healthy eating is essential for both physical and mental development.
And to tackle that, they aren't just handing out standard pamphlets or showing a video.
No, not at all. The initiative actually involves analyzing the daily eating routines of the students alongside partner schools across completely different countries.
Yeah, they are gathering the raw data of their daily fuel. Specifically, the source highlights that the project evaluates the exact presence of vegetables, fruits, dairy products, and protein-rich foods.
So they're logging everything?
Pretty much. They are looking at what the students consume for breakfast, for lunch, and even their snacks.
Oh, wow, even the snacks.
Yeah, it is a highly methodical approach to dietary intake. It establishes this stark, objective look at the building blocks going into their bodies.
Let's actually visualize how those building blocks function rather than just like treating them as items on a grocery list.
Sure.
Think about the complex root system of a plant or a tree. A tree doesn't just passively sit in the dirt. Its roots are actively, selectively absorbing specific micronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Right.
Right, to maintain cellular structure and fuel photosynthesis.
Exactly. And if the soil is depleted of those specific minerals, the tree doesn't immediately just fall over, but its growth stunts, its leaves wilt, its structural integrity is compromised.
Which is a great analogy for the human body.
It is. The human brain and body operate on an incredibly similar biological principle. I mean, think about it like a high-performance smartphone. You wouldn't expect your phone to run complex apps smoothly on a 1% battery or with a corrupted charging cable.
No, you'd expect it to crash.
Right. So you cannot expect a student's brain to maintain the cognitive turgor required to absorb complex algebra or the emotional regulation needed to navigate adolescence if they are fueling that complex biological machine with heavily processed nutrient-void materials.
Yeah, and that biological mechanism is precisely why the project targets those specific categories. The proteins, the dairy, the fruits, and the vegetables.
The essentials.
Exactly. Those are the human equivalents of the essential minerals pulled from the soil. They provide the amino acids for neurotransmitter production and, the complex carbohydrates for sustained glucose delivery to the brain.
It's all connected.
It is. When the text links this nutrition to mental development, it is referring to that direct biological pipeline.
But I do have to push back a little bit here, just representing the skeptics for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
We all know protein and veggies are the optimal fuel. That is not groundbreaking information for anyone who has been alive for the past 50 years.
Fair point.
So, does tracking every single snack and lunch actually build a sustainable habit? Or does it just make kids feel heavily micromanaged?
That's a really valid concern.
I mean, if an educational program demanded that I analyze every piece of dairy or fruit I ate for a mid-morning snack, My immediate reaction would be defensiveness, not enlightenment. Does the text suggest this creates genuine internalized habits, or is it just a form of dietary surveillance?
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychological shift the source material describes regarding this tracking process.
Okay.
The framework isn't designed as a punitive measure or a system of surveillance. It is engineered to establish a baseline of awareness.
A baseline.
Right. The text emphasizes that the ultimate goal is for students to actively gain balanced and regular eating habits during the day. Consider how most people, adults included, consume food.
It's usually pretty rushed.
It is highly automated, it's mindless. We eat while looking at screens or while rushing to the next appointment. You cannot alter a behavioral loop if you are completely blind to the reality of that loop.
Ah, so it is about making the invisible mechanisms of their daily lives visible to them.
Precisely. By analyzing breakfast, lunch, and snacks, the project pulls these thoughtless actions out of the dark and into the light. The students log their intake, and because they are doing this within an educational framework that emphasizes mental development, they begin to correlate the data.
So they see the actual impact.
Yes. A student isn't just checking a box that says, I ate an apple. They are learning to correlate the consumption of that fruit or dairy product with their cognitive performance in the classroom an hour later.
Oh, that's incredibly smart.
It shifts the motivation from an external mandate, like a teacher telling them what to eat, to an internal revelation based on their own personal data.
That makes profound sense.
Yes.
Empowering a student with their own biological data completely changes their relationship with the authority figure. They essentially become the scientists of their own bodies.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because once they have established this baseline awareness of their daily fuel, the project introduces the primary antagonist of our modern dietary story.
Fast food.
Fast food and processed foods, yes. The source states that a major goal of the initiative is raising awareness about the consumption of these heavily processed items.
Which is a huge challenge globally.
It is. But the brilliance of this e-twinning project is that they don't fight the appeal of fast food with a boring health lecture. They deploy a completely unique weapon, which is global cultural exchange.
Yes, the international partnership is the absolute cornerstone of this phase. Because students from various countries are participating simultaneously, they get the opportunity to discover healthy eating habits from completely different cultures.
It broadens their perspective immediately.
It does. They move from analyzing their own plates in isolation to analyzing a global table. The text points out that they share prominent healthy foods, traditional recipes, and eating habits from their respective national cuisines.
Wait, I understand the mechanics of sharing a recipe, but I need to ask a practical question here.
Sure, go ahead.
How does an international exchange actually stop a kid from craving a fast food burger when they log off the computer?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because if a student in Italy shares a traditional minestrone recipe with a student in Turkey who shares a local lentil dish, that is a beautiful cultural moment. But fast food is literally engineered in laboratories to hit every single salt, sugar, and fat receptor in the human brain.
It's highly addictive by design.
Exactly. So instead of just telling a student fast food is bad, they are saying, look at this amazing traditional recipe your peer in another country eats. Doesn't that make healthy eating a form of cultural exploration rather than a punishment? And does the text explain how a cultural exchange over a screen competes with that level of engineered craving?
This raises an important question about what fast food actually represents beyond just its chemical composition.
What do you mean?
Well, fast food relies heavily on ubiquity, convenience, and a flattening of culture. A fast food meal is designed to be identical whether you purchase it in Tokyo, Paris, or New York.
Right, it's totally standardized.
Yeah. It is intentionally devoid of local context, historical preparation methods, or really any connection to the land it came from. When students share traditional recipes from their national cuisines, they are actively fighting back against that cultural flattening.
Oh, I see. They are reclaiming the narrative of food.
Exactly. Humanizing nutrition through a peer's culture makes the lesson stick.
They are transforming the concept of nutrition from this sterile biological necessity into a form of social currency.
Furthermore, we have to factor in the sociology of peer influence here. Adolescents are notoriously resistant to top-down directives from adults,
Oh, tell me about it.
but they are highly receptive to the behaviors and values of their peers. When the message to value a healthy, whole food ingredient comes from a peer in a partner school halfway across the world, It bypasses those usual adolescent defenses.
That makes a lot of sense.
The text notes that this dual benefit, proudly promoting their own culture while simultaneously learning about others, increases their overall consciousness about nutrition.
And that consciousness is born from horizontal human connection, not vertical adult correction.
Perfectly said.
That is a fascinating psychological pivot. Instead of framing a vegetable as a mandatory dietary requirement, the project frames it as a cultural artifact.
Yes, it gives it meaning.
It is a piece of someone else's daily life, their family history, and their national pride. If a student from one country presents a beautiful traditional dish that their family has made for generations, there is a level of respect and curiosity demanded by that interaction.
You simply cannot replicate that with a multiple-choice health quiz.
Exactly. The project leverages the desire for social connection and cultural pride to outcompete the artificial appeal of processed foods. The students are not just rejecting fast food.
They're choosing a richer, more meaningful alternative that connects them to a global community.
But, sharing a centuries-old recipe with a peer in another country assumes one massive underlying thing,
Which is
that you can actually still get the high-quality ingredients required to make it. And that brings us to the bedrock of this entire project.
right, the final piece of the puzzle.
We started with the individual plate, analyzing the daily snacks and dairy. We zoomed out to the global cultural exchange, using traditional recipes to combat processed foods. Now, we must look at the foundation that makes every single bit of this biological and cultural activity possible.
The environment.
Yes, the Earth itself. The source notes are very explicit about this final leap in logic.
They really are. The text states that through these activities, as students grasp the importance of healthy eating, they also realize the direct effect that a clean environment has on a healthy life.
They inextricably link the two concepts.
Yes. The ultimate aim is to raise individuals who are conscious, healthy, and environmentally aware.
So what does this all mean in practice? Let's break down that specific mechanism because it is incredibly easy for us to overlook in our daily lives.
It really is.
You cannot have the high-quality vegetables, fruits, or dairy that the students were tracking in Phase 1 without a fundamentally clean ecosystem.
No, it's impossible.
Right. A traditional recipe shared from across the globe relies entirely on the agricultural health of that specific region. I want to pose a challenge to you, the listener.
Okay.
We as adults frequently treat our diet and our environmental footprint as two totally separate checkboxes on our to-do list. We have our internal health goals, and we have our external recycling or conservation goals.
Very true.
How often do you actually link the microscopic cleanliness of your local environment directly to the cellular nutritional value of the snack you just ate?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that separation you just described is exactly the paradigm the project is designed to dismantle.
It wants to tear that wall down.
Exactly. Most modern adults view environmentalism primarily as a moral or ethical duty to the planet. And while that is a valid perspective, this educational initiative frames environmental awareness as a biological necessity for the self.
It makes it personal.
Very personal. The phrase healthy body and clean environment, which serves as the literal title of the E20 project, is a deliberate pairing. The text presents them as a package deal because the biological mechanisms demand it.
It is a closed-loop system.
It is. Consider the mechanisms of soil biology and water purity. If the soil microbiome in a region is depleted or contaminated, the root systems we discussed earlier cannot absorb the necessary micronutrients.
The ones needed for the plants to thrive.
Right. Consequently, the vegetables grown in that soil will lack the essential vitamins required for the physical and mental development the project targets.
And what about the water supply?
Well, if the water supply is polluted, it compromises the integrity of the dairy and protein sources. A toxic environment guarantees toxic or nutritionally vacant food.
Which means you cannot be truly optimally healthy if the environment producing your food is compromised.
You just can't.
When the students are analyzing their daily intake and then comparing it with international traditional recipes, they are implicitly tracing that food backward through the supply chain straight into the dirt.
Straight to the source.
They are realizing that protecting the environment isn't this abstract, altruistic concept. It is quite literally about protecting the structural integrity of their own bodies and the cognitive capacity of their own brains.
And the source material uses language that implies an active realization of this link. They notice the direct effect.
It's hands-on learning.
By weaving these three concepts together, the nutrition, the culture, and the environment, The project prevents the artificial compartmentalization of knowledge that happens in most educational settings.
Right, because usually those are totally separate subjects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These students aren't learning biology in one isolated class, sociology in a second, and environmental science in a third. They're experiencing the synthesis of all three disciplines simultaneously through the highly relatable lens of their daily meals.
It really is a masterclass in holistic systems thinking. Let's briefly recap the elegant progression of the source material we've explored today, because the architecture of this project is incredibly smart.
It really builds on itself perfectly.
It does. It begins entirely with the self. It starts with establishing a baseline of physical and mental fuel by tracking the basic daily intake of proteins, dairy, and vegetables.
And then following that internal data collection, the framework leverages their newfound self-awareness outward into the social sphere.
The global table.
Right. It utilizes the cross-cultural sharing of traditional recipes as a psychological mechanism to combat the homogenization of processed foods. It fosters cultural pride to outcompete the convenience of fast food.
And finally, it grounds all of that human activity back into the earth, tying the health of the individual body and the survival of those cultural traditions directly to the health of the local and global environment.
It all comes full circle.
It is a brilliant, interconnected web where every bite of food is understood as both a cultural statement and an environmental consequence.
It equips the students with a comprehensive worldview rather than just, a list of dietary restrictions.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and perhaps slightly radical thought to end on.
Okay, lay it on us.
We've explored how this project aims to create a new baseline of awareness for these specific students during their formative years. But consider the long-term compounding interest of this kind of synthesized education.
Oh, the ripple effect.
Exactly. If an entire generation of students grows up intrinsically linking their cultural food heritage and their own cognitive bodily health directly to the environmental conditions of the planet, well, how might they completely dismantle and redesign the global fast food supply chain when they become the consumers, the voters, and the corporate leaders of tomorrow?
That's a powerful thought.
I mean, if they possess the data and the cultural pride to refuse the separation of convenience from environmental impact, the entire architectural foundation of our current food system will have to change.
And that potential systemic shift is the ultimate return on investment for an educational initiative of this nature.
They're building a new foundation.
They are not merely learning how to survive within the confines of the current agricultural and dietary system. They are acquiring the critical perspective needed to build a fundamentally better one.
We are so far away from the traditional static health class model. We are looking at the architects of a living, breathing, sustainable future.
It's really inspiring stuff.
It truly is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view your daily routine. Until next time, we encourage you to take a much closer look at your own plate and think deeply about the sociological and environmental roots of your very next meal. Keep learning and take care.